Hello and welcome to Pro Gaming Weekly. I'm your host Ben, aka Lignar. This week was kind of quiet on the news front and on the tournament front, so we've got a little bit of a shorter show for you this week. Before we start this week, we need to apologize for a major omission from last week's show. MLG held their spring arena for fighting games and we completely dropped the ball on covering it in our last episode. Pro Gaming Weekly is aimed at being an all-encompassing esports show and not just a StarCraft show. Just so happens that StarCraft is the most prominent game in esports, and while it's not a valid excuse, we were just kind of overwhelmed with all of the news and all of the action in Code S that the fighting arena simply slipped through the cracks, and we deeply apologize for those viewers that we let down by not covering it. The Iron Squid tournament wrapped up this weekend. It was played at a time that recording it really wasn't viable, and the VODs, as I booked a couple hours ago, weren't available, so we didn't get time to include the highlights in this week's show. However, we do have the results. MMA beat Alive 3-2, and Symbol beat ST 3-1 to advance to the finals, where MMA defeated Symbol 4-2 to take the championship, and ST beat Alive 3-2 to take third. And I'm really looking forward to these VODs finally becoming available, because I'm sure there were some epic moments in those games. That wraps it up for news, so let's look at some highlights.
Start off this week's look at Code S with the round of 8 Naniwa versus MVP. Game 1 in this Best of 5 series was pretty uneventful until about the 15-minute mark when MVP pushes on Naniwa's third. He manages with those Vikings to take down the Colossus, all three of them. One of them didn't even fire before it died. Just a complete waste of a unit and a very expensive one at that. Then he continues to push in. He lands his Vikings here momentarily on the Archons, but it's just long enough to get his Marines around those force fields. Naniwa did not get a very good use of his force fields at all in this game, not like we're used to seeing out of him. The third does go down as Naniwa evacuates it and just sacrifices the third so he can save his army. Then a little bit later, he pushes out in a desperation move to try to get MVP's army, but the ramp acts as a funnel, and MVP's just got too many medevacs with stem, and he's able to take out that army. Even though Naniwa does hang on for a little while, he doesn't get good use of his force fields to slow MVP down that much. He has to GG, and we're heading on in to Game 2. And in Game 2, MVP built a lot of racks early, and Naniwa either scouted it or just realized there were too many Marines for that point in the game, and it's unclear from the cast which it was. So Naniwa started building these cannons, which MVP managed to scout and came in with all of his SCVs and rallied his Marines here, and this drug out for way longer than I want to show, but regardless, you'll see here in a minute with the units that go up the ramp, Naniwa had to GG, and we're heading on into Game 3. And in Game 3, again, relatively uneventful until this encounter here at about the 12-minute mark, and Naniwa just crushes MVP's army. Just absolutely destroys it. The Immortals dealing out a ton of damage. Those chargelets just going to town. And he chases MVP all the way back home. Gotta love GOM TV for giving us these unique angles we don't see in most other casts. Here, when they get back to MVP's main, he blinks up into the main to kind of flank, and he takes down that tank right away. MVP's got a GG, and we're heading on into Game 4, where we got some cheese, and I hope you got some wine, because it goes really good with cheese. Got this nice bunker rush that manages to pull it off. It lasts for a lot longer than you would expect a bunker rush, honestly, because Naniwa is that good at micro. He manages to keep MVP a little bit at bay, but again, it's just a little bit too much. Another bunker is getting built after the last one got destroyed. Just a bit much for Naniwa to take care of. He can't get a cannon in range without it getting killed. They have the same range, so he has to GG, giving this win to MVP and sending MVP to the next round in Code S. Moving along in Code S, round of 8, we've got PvP with Parting versus Oz, where Oz goes Nexus first in this first game of Best of 5 series, and you just don't do that in PvP because you're not going to be able to build any units after you spend all those resources. Parting scouts it, and Oz finds out why you don't do that. I don't know what he was thinking. No one has been able to explain it to me. Anyway, he has his entire army right here. He has to GG. We're heading to Game 2. Where Parting pushes a little bit early, and he also uses his Immortals here, and he sacrifices them because he keeps Oz's entire army occupied. Not his entire army, but the biggest bulk of it, while he's walking into the main. And he uses force fields to keep the army at bay. Those Zealots, they're not going to do anything against those Stalkers. Again, Oz has to GG, and we're heading straight into Game 3. In Game 3, Oz tried to hide some structures and get some DTs out of a proxy here, but when he put the force field on the ramp and kept Parting out, Parting spotted it, and he takes it out, and that's the end of those DTs. A little bit later, Parting comes in, blinks into the main, takes down the Immortal, comes in and does a little bit of harassment in the main, just micros his heart out as these force fields go down. He just blinks around him, no big deal, and continues doing harassment, and Oz is just too far behind. He has to GG and give this win to Parting. Moving along in the round of 8 of Code S, we have Supernova versus Hero. We're kicking off here, game 1, again in a best of 5. Hero moves out with, look at all of those chargelets. He gets some really good storms here. Supernova just really takes it on the chin, loses a lot of his army. Nova ends up sending him back and sending him back home, and just a minute or two after that, we're in his natural now, and Hero is just really cranking out the damage. Supernova cannot keep up. The Archons come in to mop this damage up. The natural ends up going down in this engagement, and he has to GG, give the win to Hero, and hope things fare better in the rest of the series. We're in game 2. Again, not a lot happened until we get to this engagement at almost 17 minutes. Good feedback on the Ghost there. Lots of good storms going down. They can't even keep this fight on one screen. It was such a fun fight to watch. Supernova really takes a lot of damage here, but he still has a decent-sized army, though. He comes in to do some harassment on the 3rd or 4th, actually, of Hero. This army comes in, he realizes he has to pick up and go home, but these stalkers up here get the medevacs. He has to GG and take us on in to game 3, where he moves out early, relatively early, 13:25 or so, with this giant mech force. And the problem here, though, is he is not targeting down the Immortals, and the SCVs he have, they're not set for auto repair, so his Thors aren't getting repaired at all. They're just getting crunched. No repairs at all. He takes a lot of damage here from losing these really expensive units to these storms. He loses some SCVs in there as well, but they weren't on auto repair, so no big deal. Then Hero moves in and finishes the job. Supernova has to GG, sending Hero on to the round of 4. In our last look this week in the Code S round of 8, we have Teja versus Squirtle, again playing in a best of 5. And in game 1 at about 12:30, Squirtle pushes in, gets some really good use of his force fields here, keeping the army of Teja way far back while he's got those 2 Colossi there, just melting the units that do make it through, melting that bunker, keeping them from getting repaired with those force fields, getting the Stalkers up on the high ground to help out. Really good use of force fields in his units. It sets this up a little bit later where Teja needs to get this orbital down so he can mine. He's almost mined out in his main, but it goes down. He's way too far behind. He keeps denying the low ground and denying that natural expansion. And Teja has to GG because there's no way he can out macro this Protoss right now. So he has to GG and send us on into game 2. Where here, Squirtle moves in, but we get really good D from Teja, making it seem like this game is going to go in his favor, even with the force fields on the ramp and whatnot. Really good D here, forcing Squirtle to blink back out. As you'll see here in just a second, as the Marines start making it through, he's got to get out of there and go back home. Not too much later, though, he attacks again and gets really good use of the storms. The SCVs are off-screen to the top, and they're getting destroyed. We can't see that going on right now. It really, with the loss of the army and the loss of all those SCVs, puts Teja so far behind. There's no way he's going to catch up. He just has to GG and head us into game 3. And in game 3, we get into a base trade, and we see Teja kind of screw up here. He's not on attack move, so he only gets 1 or 2 of those probes. Most of them get out, and they allow Squirtle to rebuild. And had he been on attack move, he might have gotten most of them. If not, maybe gotten all of them. But as the engagements went on after the base trade, they were both a little timid, microing really well, pulling back when they needed to because they didn't know what the other guy's macro was like. Until a little bit later, Squirtle figured out that he was winning the macro war, even though Teja was able to rebuild. Squirtle was still rebuilding, probably because all of those probes got away. So he finds the production buildings of Teja, moves in, even with Teja coming in with the sandwich, trying to flank him from the rear. The storms, the force field here in a second, it just doesn't really matter. He manages to take out the entire production network of Teja, and then just in a few minutes after that, he moves back down to where Teja had planted his main. With the wall in, still doesn't matter. The storms come in. Teja has to GG and give this to Squirtle 3-0. Squirtle moves on to the round of 4.
That's all we have this week. So, see, I told you it was a little bit of a shorter show. Before we wrap things up, though, I do want to remind you to go to our Facebook page at facebook.com/ProGamingWeekly and click on the like button. Once we hit 100 likes, we're going to give away a $20 Jinx.com gift card. So spread the word. Help us hit that mark. The faster we get to 100, the faster we get to our next milestone and a bigger giveaway, like maybe a Razer mouse, something like that. Also, as I mentioned at the top of the show, StarCraft is dominating esports right now, but we are aimed at being an all-encompassing esports show. While we can't cover everything, we can certainly try, and we can at least put updates and scores in the tickers. So if you know of news or scores or a tournament for Halo or Call of Duty or Counter-Strike that you think we should cover, please let us know. You can email us at progamingweekly@gmail.com to fill us in. That's it for this episode, so until next time, thanks for watching, and see you next week.